Hello my guys, gals and non-binary pals, and welcome to a new video by Dan Fatals. My name is Alicia, my pronouns are she, they, and today we're gonna talk about Zerocalcare. This word can tear me down, which is the new series which in Italian is Questo Mondo non mi renderà cattivo. Why are we talking about it? Because as you can probably tell from my accent, I am Italian, I'm half Italian, but I was born and raised there, which, let me tell you, if you're just half of that, you're not Italian. But that's kind of why I feel like I have possibly an interesting point of view to bring to the outside world a lot of the stuff that Michele Zerocalcare did already excellently, but with some of the commentary. Before we get into it, very quick PSA. If you like what we do and you're wondering why we can disappear months at a time, that's because our channel is incredibly small. We don't even have advertisement on it yet. We just base everything that we do on Patreon, and it's what we do on our off time. So if you would like to see more of our stuff, you can check out Patreon and see if you would like to sustain and support what we do. And if you do, thank you so much, and let's start the revolution. That being said, so realistically, I have wanted to talk about Tear Along the Dotted Line, the first series that came out in 2021, for a while. I had this very peculiar personal relationship with that series in the sense that for something like a year and a half, so since it's been out, it was out in like November 2021, I've had this weird thing that became a ritual that most mornings that I would wake up while waiting like for Raven to wake up, while doing stuff around, I tendentially have the entire series of 6 episodes of Tear Along the Dotted Line going in the background of the TV. And I kept wondering, like, Michele and I are from the same year. A lot of the reference that he brings are from my generation and my experience of Italy, except for the fact that, he's a guy and he's white. But, as things go, he has a very interesting, altruistic, in a way, point of view, because he cares about human rights, which is not to be taken for granted in Italy. But I thought that was the point, but I was like, it's a lot that I keep on watching it, to the point that I know it by memory now, and I still want to watch it. It has a great soundtrack, maybe it's that. A couple of months ago, I was trying to explain this to a friend of mine, and maybe typing it down made me realize, oh, the reason why I like this so much is that something that I always say about Italy, and the reasons why I migrated, is that, if I'd stayed in Italy, they would have eaten me up alive. Because the unofficial rules, the way that it works, especially as a neurodivergent person, on top of it being half Egyptian, in a way that my surname doesn't make me escape. I talked about it in the fatphobia and racism video. Up until university, I had professors made fun of my surname, like making it sound like, I don't know, they had something in their throat, because stuff like that, or chanting it in a very monkey-like way, because it's a very obviously Arab surname. So given that, I worked in Italy for 6 months, but I've been living abroad since I was 21, and thankfully so. But by saying that, and then connecting to, spoiler for Tear Along the Dotted Line if you haven't seen it, on how it goes and how the story of Alice goes, the point is, I don't like to say it and make a fuss about it, but reality is, if I hadn't get out of Italy, the story of Alice would have been my story. And especially when, at the end, in the gym, her parents talk about her, saying how she didn't want to eat up other people, basically. And I was like, yeah, that ironically is what I always say. They would have eaten me up, and I'm not. That doesn't work for me, or I couldn't do it. So, that's a bit heavy, which is kind of the point of Tear Along the Dotted Line. It's heavy, but it's presented to you in such an entertaining way that until you get to the end, you don't feel the full strength of the slap on your face. So as you can guess, because the new season was out on the 9th of June, I was very much looking forward to it with anticipation. So while on Tear Along the Dotted Line, he hit the issues of the country in a personal story, and indeed Italy chewed out and spat out Alice, it was still a very personal story. In This World Can't Tear Me Down, it's not that delicate. The issue is the country, and it's fair enough that it's like that. It's still brought down in a personal story then, which is the story of Cesare, but it's inescapable how the culture is the issue. And it starts off with the song. I personally didn't know the singer-songwriter that did the soundtrack of first Tear Along the Line and now This World Can't Tear Me Down, who is Giancane. I love his stuff though. And the song brings up events that actually happen in Italy and basically go to show how disorganized and everyone for themselves the country is. When it mentions the bridges collapsing, it's an issue that happened in Genova a few years ago. And usually that kind of stuff happens because instead of giving the kind of contract for that thing to the company that was better suited and more experienced to do that, we do it for a friend of a friend or someone that gave us money to get that contract. It's also unofficial, and it's how it brings problem. The bridge collapsed with people like falling and dying. Another thing that it mentions is it's not something to laugh about. Is the ship and the issue that there were when I don't remember. It was somewhere on the western side of the seaside in Italy. The ship got stuck in some rocks, basically, relatively close to the seashore, but some people again died, but not the captain. The captain really didn't go down with the ship. It was one of the first ones to run away. So it's the kind of, again, everyone for themselves kind of attitude, no responsibility taken. So yeah, if you were wondering why the song mentions the dancing minister, it's because senators actually did it, and that's what it refers to. In 2021, an MP by the name of Alessandro Zan tried basically to bring the Equality Act to Italian law, meaning that if you attack someone because of their identity, sexuality, or even because they had a disability, then you get an exacerbated penalty, which is fair. Because, you know, it's a bit of an issue if you attack someone for something that they can't change. A bit different with fascists that can cry Antifa all they want, but if they stop being dickheads against human rights, we don't care what they do. But that's basically what happened when the DDL Zan didn't pass. The Senate was blocked, and a lot of ministers, tendentially from the right, started to party because they managed to block human rights laws.
Well, for the sake of argument, it's like a package arriving a month ago that no one wants to sign for. Because it was in the way and there was no delivery note, so they ended up taking it round the houses. Until they finally got to a neighbourhood that we'll call Dixville. And like every time these packages arrive, after 2 seconds, the Nazis appear and start winding people up. Are we seriously being forced to sign for this? We've got all of our own shit going on and we have to deal with this too. That example was an extremely simplified way to explain the dynamics. But the package is actually 35 people, men, women and children, who arrived from Libya a month ago.
I think if you want to get an idea of the issues with immigration that Italy thinks they have, the metaphor of the box that Zerocalcare brings, it's perfection. It is about that thing that in Italy we call the scaricabarile, which admittedly Italy has accepted an extremely good deal from the European Union, which basically puts them in the position of, European Union basically told Italy, we know that you are one of the first place for immigrants to land upon, but guess what? You take them on, be decent, and we pay you a disproportionate amount of money. The infamous 35 euros that Italians at some point were so angry about, the idea that the government was giving these immigrants and refugees, mainly refugees actually, 35 euros a day. Oh my God, people don't make that much. They never got that money. It was what the European Union was paying Italy to have shelters and centers to welcome these people. But that's how Nazis reuse information to basically tell you that you need to be angry at them. So the box example, impeccable. Well done, Zerocalcare. The issue is the country, as we said, and indeed, it's the culture of Italy, and we give it names, namely Nazis, because Italy has a law that you can't make apologies of fascism, but it keeps letting new incarnations of the fascist party evolve, and no one goes and say anything. Even when people who wear black shirts go to Mussolini's birthplace to celebrate his birthday. Then if you don't do anything to that, we're just kidding around. But meanwhile, people die because either they can't endure it, like Alice, or because the government doesn't protect you. So the fascists feel free to come and attack you because they know that the country will let them, will do nothing to them. In episode 2, we see more of Cesare, and by the end of it, we realize that he's along with the people that are putting on posters against these refugees in this shelter, and it is a bit of a shock for Michele. The issue that is highlighted there is very, 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 very common, and is what we've seen in the last few years, not just around Italy, but around the world, with people like Jordan Peterson preparing and prepping lonely guys, essentially, to be mad at the world and then do bad stuff to people that have absolutely no fault. When bad things happen to you, and there is not a system not even to help you out, but to make it understandable what the big picture is, you fall to the war between the little people, between paupers, that the media pander to. Because at the end of the day, to own media, guess what? You need money. And if you take advantage from capitalism, you don't want all the little people to understand that they need to gather against you. So making them fight between each other buys you time. So you have an interest in keeping people ignorant and mad, because the day that they gang up and organize, it's the Elons, the Berlusconi, which now we don't have to worry about anymore. They start to go down, and there won't be enough money in the world to buy them decency or safety at that point. I'll be honest, beside privilege, as much privilege as the grandchild of farmers one can have, for as long as I lived in Italy, I genuinely had no understanding of the basics of politics. Just even the basics of the right wants everything to stay the same and to pay less taxes and sort of everyone for themselves, while the left wants a system to take care of everyone. The only vague info I got was that people on the left were indeed dirty punks with dogs around the city that sucked up and stole resources, and indeed they were thics, as they call them. I guess the issue with Italy is because in the 70s they actually had far-left terrorism. Not sure if it happened anywhere else, but at some point the Red Brigades kidnapped and killed the prime minister who was from the right, Aldo Moro. So in a way, I guess that the left is still paying for that in reputation.
We're just fucked up. Nice one. Fucking's for men, liking's for fags, and love is for women. Let's say that in the suburban food chain, they were the predators at the top of the pyramid. And showing weakness meant being downgraded and getting mauled. So Cesare rightly adapted to that standard.
When in episode 3 we talk about the pyramid of society, basically, it delivers exactly the dog-eat-dog mentality that Italy has. So you have to be rough. You either escape Italy or you survive it, and the survival makes you really tough, which allows you to survive there, but it also makes it hard to concede upon anything, because if you even have the decency to stop and wonder, maybe I can do things differently, that is taken as weakness, and they will eat you alive. So the arrogance develops from that. Even if we stay supremely ignorant, we cannot give the impression that we are ready to hesitate. And that is, in a nutshell, how we can be so convincingly incompetent as a culture.
So then, since the start of this story, I know you've all really been thinking, so why is he saying the word Nazis? Does he still think it's 1945? He's like that granddad who thinks there's a bomb siren going off every time the microwave pings? No, I'll explain it to you methodically. In this country, if you used to say fascist, it was horrible. Now nobody seems to give a shit anymore. They just say,
well, he's a fascist, but he's all right.
It's a bit like saying,
well, he's a celiac, bit of a pain in the bum when you have your tea out, but it's not a big deal.
Nazism, however, is the last bastion still struggling to find space in the market of democracy. Maybe due to the fact that Jewish people are still kind of upset at what they went through during the Holocaust. So basically, if you think that the Axis powers should have won the Second World War, then for me you're a Nazi, end of. I don't give a shit about knowing in which years it was legitimate to beat people up and make them drink casserole, blah, blah, blah.
Now, the Nazi definition that Zerocalcare gives is perfect, and I would have had no way to explain it better. Why? Why are we talking about Nazis like we're not in 45 anymore? The issue is that despite that law about apology of fascism, fascism never died in Italy. There's a lot of legacy from it that just remain normalized. Like, remember, at some point, there was sort of a civil war between Italy, which was fascist and with Hitler, and the partisans, which were not. But even with that excuse of sort of jumping sides and then sort of half winning the war, like Italy was given a lot of money from the Marshall Plan from America to reconstruct because technically they jumped ship at some point. So that way, there was never really an undoing of the actual mentality that brought to fascism. So that's why Italy is still very, very much a country on the right side of the spectrum. Even our left is not quite defined as proper left. And again, unfortunately, we lost a proper side of communism because of what happened in the 70s. So that definition of why we call them Nazi, it's very, very much on point, because fascism is not seen as an issue anymore in Italy, and that's why we have fascists in government. And if you just say fascist, it's still fine. Looking at you, Georgia.
So look, I know you're doing this in good faith, but they're not nice people. You poor guy, you don't know, because for 20 years you've been off the face of the earth, but know that these people... Why are you treating me like a... Those are the only people who have listened to me since I've been back. I get it, but they're using you because they need your help with this shit. Okay, so I should listen to you instead? You who came to me crying that you work too much, or that other bitch who hasn't even found the time to come and say hello to me? Yeah, I know, but look. What do you know? What the fuck do you know? You make money by telling stories about your life with all these applauding you. But do you know what it feels like when no one gives a fuck about you? When you're just an ex-addict and people can't even remember who the fuck you are. You're just a fucking ghost in a shitty community that even God's forgotten about. What the fuck do you know about this shit? But what the fuck have those 30 poor people got to do with our shitty lives, Cesare? I don't give a shit about those 30 poor people. I'm mad at everyone else. The state who supports them, gives them money, gives them houses. When they've never given me fuck all! But what are they giving them? They've filled your head with bullshit. Can't you even see that? Fuck off. You really pissed me off now. Listen, I know you're not really like this. Let's start again with the Socratic method. Get away from me, for fuck's sake! I swear I'll go.
Again, the discussion that then Zerocalcare has with Cesare just goes to show that when people are isolated, whoever listens to you gets you and your loyalty and your action. And that's why I was saying, look at all the lonely men that Jordan Peterson has turned around being fascists now.
Our pterodactyl friend is one of those people who is particularly active in neighborhoods driven by noble ideals. And I represent those people as dinosaurs because I think they're cool people, and dinosaurs are the coolest thing in nature. As well as being as cool as dinosaurs, they also have something else in common with them.
Are you sure that you can say that type of thing?
Yes, to explain, they're not extinct, but let's say they're witnesses of an era.
Why are you getting bogged down with all this? It will just make us argue with the only people who might not want to kill you after they've watched this series.
Well, no, I'm saying that they're the heirs to a long-held tradition that is now partly fading away in society.
The dinosaur point is an amazing point, but probably the only one that I disagree with Michele on. I disagree, but I understand why in Italy feels like that. Because the majority has to survive and be tough, and so those who fight for rights are the dinosaurs there. But I'd like to think that in the larger perspective, dinosaurs are actually those who refuse to evolve, and much like the previous definition of political right, they love to stay stuck. So in the big picture of the world, I have the feeling that I'd like to think that dinosaurs are the other ones, despite how cool they look.
Dinosaurs.
You know, but yeah, but
we have rape.
Yeah, but most of them got hit by the meteorite.
I think these situations are indeed very delicate, and politics really shouldn't exacerbate them.
What's she saying? She seems a bit timid. What does exhibit mean?
But I think that the schools in working class areas are important. And if the only way of keeping them open is to close the shelter, maybe that's what needs to be done.
Now, the point where the idealism of Sarah gets distracted is it's something very, very important that I'm very glad was inserted. Like, we're all good at being idealist, but we can get complacent if there's always something going on, someone else to fight battles. Sometimes it feels like, but am I really needed when there are organizations like Stonewall or BLM fighting? And without realizing, those are still made of people too. And back to the people who have the money to sway opinion by owning media, the issue of propelling the general care of culture for human rights is that usually they do it out of sympathy, not empathy, meaning that, well, it's rare that someone cares about getting rights to people that they already have them, basically. So in that sense, the left is vulnerable. We get cornered easy because we don't have something bigger to cover our backs, and like media, money, and all that kind of stuff. And if being openly protesting, or Antifa in this case, we lose our jobs. We don't have the like Christian cultish kind of thing that they have in the US that pay for everyone. And so Sarah, as finally her dream job, can only risk so much without losing what keeps her afloat to survive. What is that film that we watched with the Christians paying the wife of someone to be the Christian example? I think it was a film, not a series, but it upsets me that I can't remember. It was from the 90s. It was the Monica Lewinsky thing. On the side of the main scandal of Monica Lewinsky and how it's being made in America. It's not American Horror Story, it's American Crime Story, thank you. A side plot beside Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton is this woman who claims to have slept with Bill Clinton, who is the wife of someone, and they are really like low in social levels. So this Christian association brings her in, does a makeover, gives her all the money in the world as long as she goes out and speaks about the values and how horrible a person Bill Clinton is because he's a Democrat, and so they need to bring it down. So those kind of associations of organizations, what are they called nowadays? There are still those kind of organizations. Like, who are the ones that are paying basically in America people to keep down the rights of transgender people? There are a few organizations, I don't remember the names.
It's like the Heritage Foundation.
Yes, the Heritage Foundation is one, and that kind of thing. Yeah, fun times.
I'll explain the event that gave it its name. In the mid-90s, Rome was like Alabama in terms of the open-mindedness of its people. Alfredone used to go out in Tiburtina holding hands with his boyfriend. One time a guy on a moped passed by and said, "You faggot!" Alfredone was fast, and he had hands the size of pizza paddles. For all the others, however, the great decree of the empire of the suburbs continued to apply. And it applied to everything, not just sexuality. Anything deemed eccentric, outside known and reassuring beauty or behavioral canons Generally speaking, we really fucking hate. In the 2 years that I had that red mohawk, I think I was beaten up more times than in the rest of my life put together. By that point, the hospital was like a second home. I had a fixed slot every week.
In episode 4, the point that Rome is like Alabama in the 90s is actually very, very descriptive of one of the main issues of Italy. That if you were to live there, you would experience every day, I think to this day still. Otherwise said, the mob mentality. So we have yearly trends that people of a certain age bracket are expected to follow and to wear, therefore, a very limited wardrobe that is recognized as an unofficial uniform. In 94 to 95, it was, I don't know why, barber jackets for people in middle school. So you had these 11 years old with barber jackets like the Queen, ready to go fish or hunt a deer. Don't ask me why that started, but it was a thing. And if you didn't have your barber jacket, like me, you would get bullied into oblivion. If you don't adhere to the current trend, you're going to get ostracized, bullied, derided. It's an issue and something not obvious because, again, from the outside, you think Italy, fashion, but the normalcy and beigeness that it requires from people actually living there, it's another function of how your individual identity, if it makes you stand out, it gives you a bullseye on your back. And Michele with his mohawk completely, perfectly delivers that. Basically, if you can't defend yourself, you can't be yourself in Italy.
Sarah, don't you realise that's exactly what's been happening for the past month with those 30 poor people being driven from one area to another? If someone at some point doesn't set the principle, but does this principle thing only apply to me? You've all done your own shit and sorted your lives out. You've already found your place in the world. But when it comes to me, I have to lose everything and say nothing because principles are more important. Excuse me, but in my work, I've always tried to do everything right and respect the principles I set myself. And the principle of not leaving anyone behind? All the bullshit about going at the pace of the slowest one? Do you know what my pace is? Do you want to know what it is?
What is it?
I don't have one, all right, because I'm tied to a pole. I'm stuck there, just watching you get smaller and further away. You don't even turn around to look. I'm really sorry if you think that, Sarah. You don't even turn around to look!
The discussion that happens with Sarah, I think, again, is one of those things that Zerocalcare has understood what are the rightful criticisms that can be put to the left. And if you put them in a realistic situation in a person, that's the only way that you can make people understand, because when you give generic concepts, you cannot internalize them, you cannot see them as humans. So Sarah speaking about the importance that it has for her, for the school to stay open, because it's the first time that she's had a chance, and she's 40. In a patriarchal, misogynistic society like Italy, yes, this is her last chance, she's lucky that she's even getting it now. So I understand the kind of protectionism that she has in even compromising, not even compromising her principles, because again, she says it's not like I'm on the side of those that have a swastika on their forehead, but it's just not a fight that I can fight if one of the things that I risk losing is my livelihood, the livelihood that I've worked 20 years to get to.
People with a lot of melanin.
Nah, she didn't actually say people with a lot of melanin. She said another word that we've decided not to use, but not because of all that dictatorship of political correctness bullshit, which doesn't exist.
Rainbow Police, you are under arrest.
No, because the issue's complicated. On the one hand, if there's a racist monster in a work of fiction, it doesn't make sense for you to make it speak as nice as pie.
Hello, everyone.
On the other hand, it's true that if you want certain words to disappear from common use, then at some point, you need to stop using them. Otherwise, they'll keep going round and round forever and ever.
This point of using words, again, it's of a poetic decency and delicatessenness that I'm really surprised and really glad that Zerocalcare was able to bring. Again, there is no rainbow police that is gonna come and cut your tongue if you don't use the right pronouns, or if you don't stop using words that have become culturally and contextually loaded, racist, problematic. However, even when you want to put them in the mouth of the bad character of the situation, it still brings those words to be used. So that's why it doesn't use, in that case, the N-word, which in Italy, because they tell themselves that they are not America, they didn't have slavery, so it's fine that we do this stuff. It's fine that we use the N-word. It's not the same as the American N-word. And you know what? It's fine that we do blackface. Again, we didn't have slaves. Completely ignoring the colonies that Mussolini had us have in the Horn of Africa for around 60 years before finally we lost World War II, regardless of what some say. And again, we managed to forget completely about that past because no accountancy was given. Partisans and all, so there are goods and bads. We talked about it in the Fatphobia and Racism video. If you're wondering about the colonial past that Italy never talks about and doesn't even make you study if you actually study in Italy, go take a look at that one. But that's why the importance of using words, even when you are representing a monster, because you keep using them, you keep propelling them in the future. People imitate, people, not worth it. Well done, Zerocalcare.
So, to briefly explain now what Greta said, you all need to consider that our municipal council is essentially divided into 3 large areas. 2 of them represent the great traditions of the 20th century, with progressives on one side and conservatives on the other. Obviously, they have spanned the centuries, the evolution of species, blah blah, and now they've transformed because they've adapted to time. Conservatives today are represented as those huge mammals firmly planted on the ground with a very strong link to people's moods. In theory, they are bringers of lofty issues which might well be debated. The understanding of individualism, the value of tradition, the invisible hand of the market. But in this city, everything is reduced to what do we do with these immigrants? And they stay balanced because although some of them do think like the Nazis, they'd still rather vote for a candidate without a swastika tattooed on their face. Okay, it's a given the walruses will vote for the council to be held there. And now the progressives. So with these, I think that at least on this topic, we'll be relatively safe. Don't worry that they look down on you, because over the years, they grew this very long neck as they needed to reach the fruit on the highest branches in the Capelbia rainforest. After all, they left behind a legacy of values of equality and being welcoming. So at least they shouldn't vote for the Nazis' motion. All that's left behind is the 3rd area, which is the platypuses.
What a pain in the ass.
No one knows what the fuck they are, this senseless jumble of poorly assembled animals. They appeared out of nowhere a few years ago from the failed ideologies of the 20th century, with buzzwords like, "You really need to be honest!" And you say, no shit, no one's telling you to steal, are they? But after the Stone Age, the Iron Age, and the Golden Age, this is the no shit age. They won the last elections and therefore have the majority here. But they're not Nazis, so they shouldn't insist on having that fucking meeting outside the shelter.
The political explanation of the platypuses, the giraffes, and the walruses, I wish I had when I grew up in Italy, because it would have given me a much, much better understanding of the entire political world there. Because again, there are a few issues in Italy. One of the issues that it's sort of touched upon, but not enough, I feel, with the presenter of the show that Zerocalcare is supposed to go to, Mauro Coccodrelli. It doesn't deliver enough in Italy because, by the way, a friend of mine who is a linguist recently explained to me English is a much more direct kind of language, whilst Roman languages, Latin languages, go much more in circles and repeat things. And for that reason, they have a much wider vocabulary and so many different words can mean the same thing. And when you pick the higher one, the more elitist one, it sounds like you're saying something intelligent. That is absolutely an art of Italian, especially Italian politicians, that can go on TV and talk for 5 minutes non-stop because they use these big words, and actually, at the end of it, you don't understand what they've said. You just have to believe that they sounded cultured enough because of the vocabulary that they picked. Because of that, again, I lived in Italy for 20 years of my life, never even understood the difference between left and right. Admittedly, with the explanation of the walruses, the platypuses, and the giraffes, which I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, if you live in Italy and you have a better understanding than this, again, I haven't lived there since 2007, so some things might escape me. The platypuses, I think, weren't there in 2007, started to be there in 2010. The platypuses should be the five-star movement, which are all wishy-washy but it won them the majority. So that worked at the time. That was before, of course, we were talking about actual fascists in power in Italy now.
Anyway, just between us, you're right to protest. What's happening right now is totally unacceptable, and the president is really incompetent. When we were in government, I'm telling you, this would never have happened.
Oh, Greta, for God's sake, are you all voting yes?
Yes, but we don't agree with the Nazis. We're not crazy. It's for the greater good.
What greater good? Do you not understand that if we meet with the Nazis, people will get hurt?
Yes, it is regrettable, but then we can say to everyone that the platypuses can't even manage a municipal council, and the president will step down.
Okay, I get it, but it'll be us who get our heads cracked open.
Yes, heads getting cracked open is always unpleasant, but you need to put it into perspective. He steps down, we're back in, and we'll reimburse you for the bandages.
The giraffes explain very, very well what's the problem with champagne socialism everywhere. The fact that they have the tall necks to look down on you already starts to explain it very, very well. One thing that I know, and I spoke often to Raven about, or better, they explained to me, and I'm like, I never thought about it like that. Thank you so much for explaining that to me, is the way that the left, a lot of times, allows awful things to happen because that way they can point the finger to the right. And the example in this show is exactly that. In this case, the giraffes vote for to give in to the Nazis, to have the council meeting in front of the shelter, which likely will bring to a riot, because that way they basically prove that the platypuses, the wishy-washy five-star, shouldn't be in charge. They will go back in charge. But they keep on doing that on the skin of actual people, because them being champagne socialists will not be touched by this. So they have all these high principles. But as they say in Italy, which is actually, I think, oh no, I can't say that. I think that that's actually, there's this saying in Italy, which is, everybody is gay with the ass of someone else. I have a feeling that we're no longer in the environment to say something like that.
It's funny though.
It is, isn't it? Usually it's also said in sort of a Roman accent, col culo dell'altri. But yeah, everybody's gay with someone else's ass, basically, with someone else's asshole. So yeah, that's kind of the attitude of the Italian left of Renzi, which is why in Italy it's very, very simple to say, oh, politicians, they are all the same. I challenge someone to come and tell me that Jeremy Corbyn would have been the same as Boris Johnson when Jeremy Corbyn in the 80s was picketing against the apartheid state in South Africa. I challenge you, do come and tell me that, and let's have a talk. Italy, no, it's admittedly much more wishy-washy, and even if you shouldn't be all around, the idea of everyone for themselves extends from the right everywhere. It's just a kind of mentality. Now, much like Zerocalcare, with the fear of embodying the worst and most mysterious of the tarot, which is the fucking know-it-all, allow me to give you my 2 cents of my personal understanding of why Italy and Italian culture is the way it is. And this is just pure personal conjecture because of experience and because of reading and studying about Italy once outside of it, so that the general bullying of, we're just making a joke, oh, you can't take a joke, which is the standard bullying of everybody in Italy, didn't affect me as much. So, Italy, if you ask me, is funded, the Italian Republic is not funded on labor, which is what they say, it's funded on the idea of scarcity. So it doesn't matter actually how affluent your personal family is or your personal experience is. The general feeling is always, if somebody has something, they surely are taking it from me. I think this mentality comes from the fact that Italy is a very, very young country as one thing. And what it was before, basically since the fall of the Roman Empire to Italy, 1861, is city-states, which are very, very small powers, and with a lot of other powers like that surrounding it, which potentially could take everything that you have any day. Because of that, and because it lacks a central organism to look up to and also to feel protected by, Italy has this mentality of scarcity that watches their back from everybody else, and so we lack the ability of creating a community and actually feeling like the three rules that Zero and Sara talk about, that either we all are elevated or none is. It's very hard to get into that mindset in Italy because of that, because of this perceived scarcity. Ironically, I was having a chat with Raven about this. Not that the British Empire has actually done any good ever, but if there is a silver lining, then I guess it's that sense of national identity that brought people together and therefore made them feel part of the same thing. Then it still required the privilege of people not actually being affected directly, and so you need to be rich, you need to be taking advantage of the empire and the colonies, all of that. But that sense of national identity without going into Nazi is something that Italy doesn't have yet. Because, again, they have been one for a little over 100 years. And culturally, Italy is very, very fragmented. Like the standard of things that happen in Northwest Italy are different from the Northeast, which are different from Central Italy, which are different from South Italy, which are different from Sicily, which are different from Sardinia. And so bring all of these together, while the culture is still fragmented, we still will look at each other with suspicion. And that's just something that is still intrinsic of Italy. And I think that's why fascism allowed this incredibly welcomed thing, because horrible as it was, it gave some people that had the privilege not to be affected by it, this kind of national identity to fall under. And that's why we are vulnerable to fascism, and it's happening again. Those were my 2 penny. Now you can resume talking about the episodes. Episode 5 starts aptly with a song by an Italian band called 883, like the Harley Davidson, which is called Cumuli. Okay, tip or dump of stuff, which is drugs, and swords, which is needles. So that song is actually about, someone who went to rehab. So it's relevant to Cesare. However, and here I bring my personal experience again, here I'll explain why of all the soundtrack of Zerocalcare, this shouldn't have been included if you ask me. Now, this takes a lot, again, of Italian history to discuss, which I don't think Italy has discussed yet. In fact, the singer and songwriter of that song is still very famous and one of the main people of importance as a musician in Italy, Max Pezzali. Now, technically, I should owe a debt of life changement to this band, because it's the band that I saw the first gig of in my hometown when I was 12, changed my life. I want to work into the music industry. 10 years later, I'm working at MTV in London. It's not just his fault because Italy is misogynistic. However, in 1998, he publishes this book, which, sweetie, now you're gonna get for me, because it's there. It's on the 3rd shelf from the top. And it's just after the Mucca one. And literally says 883. It has the little Max Pezzali, 883, just after Mucca, very much on the right. But before Bellissima. After Mucca, before Bellissima. Yes! Good, princess. Thank you. Yeah, indeed. In 1998, he wrote this book, which I got last year because I was talking about it in Fatphobia and Racism. So this was published when I was 15, and I looked up to Max as he was a big brother. Like, he was from Northwest Italy as well. His life was not kind of my life because he was white, cis, het, a man. But, you know, it was kind of the collective imagination of that area when I was 16, remember, when I was 16. On chapter, there are no chapter, it's just by the end of it. He talks about how teenagers, and we're talking about 15, 16 years old girls, are the ones who really tempt away from family the 30 years old, who are so naive and unexpected into the grasp of these manipulative children. Well, he doesn't say children, but they are. I'll read and translate live. Let's hope that this works. Today, the 30-year-old man of our generation is at risk to be fooled by everyone. He can even fall in love with an Albanian prostitute. Again, we just forget all this kind of prejudice stuff. To redeem her. Poor thing, she also has to make money, but with me it's different. She really loves me. In his heart, he knows that it's not true, that it's absolute bullshit, but he pretends to believe it. He is frightened. He goes out of the house and he doesn't know what he's going to find. The other day, a friend, such a good musician and historic figure of the Pavese is where he's from, Pavia, punk, very happily married. Do you have 5 minutes? He asked me with a shock on his face. Okay, let's go to the bar. Oh, I'm in a mess, he continues. How come? You know, my daughter was born. Gosh, I'm so happy. Yeah, me too, but I have to leave my wife. What? Max, I fell in love with a girl, a young one. I seduced her. I took the initiative. But what are you telling me? What the fuck? You're 30 years old. Yeah, in fact, after that, I told her that nothing was coming out of it, but yesterday she come to see me. He was desperate, wrapped around the finger of a young girl that maybe because of a game, maybe just because she wanted to try with someone adult. It's okay as long as this happened to the person working in the office. But maybe a musician, a creative, a real one. Maybe it's because the 16 years old of today are war machines. With an association and gathering of data, they bring to better elaborations much more subtle than any 25-year-old. And that, to us from 67, is a horror tunnel. Italy has a huge issue with misogyny, a huge issue with pedophilia, which we don't talk about because the age of consent is 14. So officially, a 16-year-old is not a child in Italy, and that's a problem, but we don't talk about that. This man, still so well looked in Italy, wrote these things about 16 years old, ruining the lives of these 30 years old who go find them, seduce them by admission, and then it's still the fault of the girl. And we just support this stuff. Again, I should be in a very, very thankful position because, admittedly, I wouldn't have most of the life that I had if I didn't go to their concert, and that impacted my life. But I also remember these, and I remember reading these while I was this age, and my thought back then in that culture was, you know what, maybe it means that we are clever in our own way. That was my acceptance of life. So I wouldn't have used that song. Just a thought. To end on episode 5, though, it's very, very important the fact that it's brought to the attention of people that most of the people there on the left fighting the Nazis, again, are not people in a position of power or privilege economically. They have their own lives to worry about, but they have the basic sympathy to understand, like the Albanian woman that goes and speaks to Zero saying, well, this could have been me 10, 20 years ago. And so they gather together to fight the Nazis, even if they have many, many more problems to worry about. And that, in a nutshell, is the value of the left, if you ask me.
Is that Sarah? Who? And continue talking bullshit about this area.
Fuck, she was right. I hadn't noticed anything, but there were 8,000 journalists huddled around with their popcorn, watching us play out this movie.
The media bit about the circus in episode 6, where they are all just trying to film the riot, my point, like they need a story to make all of the people fighting, mostly the lefties. Again, the concept of how disgraceful the left is in Italy, you have no idea about, because a sense of general common decency in the English-speaking world is there. Like, people do understand, like the majority didn't vote Trump, like that's what I mean. As a general understanding and rule, we know what's decent from what's not. In Italy, these things are turned around on their head, and the left, who fights for human rights and against fascists, are the people to put in jail and that kind of thing. And that's the story that the media has to spin. Because as you can guess, our equivalent of Murdoch was Berlusconi, dead at 86, because it doesn't matter how much you fuck up a country, that does not buy you immortal life. One thing that we all share in common. But that's the thing, like, he had no interest in people going against the empire of capitalism that he brought in Italy, and that he went to government because, by his own admission, if I don't get into government, I will be arrested. Yeah, that's the kind of country we're talking about. And the media serve all of these on a platter. I think the way that it ends with basically showing the human decency that goes beyond the lines. Like, I know that it's very convenient to say, let's not politicize things. But past 2016, we are in a world where the political finally has been made clear. It's a matter of life or death for people who don't come from a certain level of privilege. So it's not political, it's about human rights. And the fact that Cesare is the person that actually hit the Nazi boy. But still, Sarah, who is a lefty, could just give them to the police. They keep on pressuring them, like, give the name of who hit him, because there's no point. You all will go down. You all will be taken to court and to a process if you don't give us the name. And even if it's Cesare, and even if he was on the side of the right, because he tried to reason, the right turned on him. And so the people of the left are like, well, no, we're not going to snitch on him, even if it's going to cost to us. Because I think the point that is made unofficially is, see, as long as there's a chance to talk with people in good faith, which most of the Nazis don't do, but Cesare was brought in, and then he can still be reasonable and he talks, that kind of genuine reconsideration, it's all that is needed. And it's not by chance that at that point, when Maddalena makes very, very valid points, the Nazis don't want her to speak, because they're not there for anything reasonable. They're just there for hate. They want to take it against the immigrants. They want to be bullies, because the day that fascism is properly back in Italy, they can wear their black shirts and that gives them power. They think that they already did. So I think, all in all, this series, I was really worried because I loved Terra Along the Dotted Line. I felt it on a personal level, so I was concerned about how do you do that again? No. Zerocalcare is good in that sense. Again, maybe because we share a generation. He managed to survive in Italy. I didn't, but the point of view that we speak from, I feel is very, very close by, and I'm extremely grateful that someone from Italy can explain things that way, and I am so glad that it got dubbed so that kind of information can get to people to the outside of Italy that have no idea how truly fucked up as a country it is, because a lot of things don't get out of the country. There's no need. They're not in English. They don't get into international news, but it should. And on that note, if you're wondering about just exactly how fucked up Italy currently is politically, I think that this video by Costanza Polastri will tell you a lot about the person and the past of Giorgia Meloni to understand who the first female prime minister of Italy is. I hope this was useful. If you have any idea or comments, you can leave them here. And I will hopefully see you at the next video if I manage to actually put the research that I have done for a video that Raven has put together. And we just missed my chapter because I have research anxiety. I research and then I have a hard time actually putting it down, but I'll make it.